Welcome back, everyone, and Happy New Year. Today is January the 1st, and I just got back to Toronto from Las Vegas, where I was playing in the North American Open tournament that took place over the last 5 days or so. We are going to take a look at one of these games, and this one was fascinating and particularly interesting. That being said, the whole tournament as a whole wasn't a great success. I can say that I'm a little disappointed, but I think you have to come close to the jackpot before you hit it. And I guess I'll have to learn from the mistakes I made here. Now, this game was particularly fascinating, and it took place in round six against an opponent from Armenia named Eduard Hakobyan. So Eduard was black and I was white. So what I want to do in this game is show you what went on in my mind, how the decision making process impacted the moves, and what were the variations that were considered. Okay, and I should tell you at the end, it was very exciting. We were playing on increment, and a bunch of study-like moves had to be made just to keep the game going. So without further ado, let's take a look. We have the Sicilian that starts with e4, c5, knight f3, and basically what I'm saying is, let's see what you got. Do you want to play the knight or the dragon? Maybe the, I don't know, Sveshnikov, Kalashnikov with knight c6, but he's okay with the Paulsen structures. And I could get them if I play something like d4. Thing is, usually I would play c3 here and just get some sort of a lapin. But in this game, I felt like trying out b3. You know, it's a system I like to try from time to time. And the whole idea of this Western system, it was created by this Icelandic GM, I believe. And the whole idea is something like, they don't want the dark squares, so we're going to take them. And if they try to play something like d5 right away, which is pretty commonsensical, then how do they like not to castle? Because that's what usually happens, is that they have little time to castle and the king gets stuck in the middle as we've already castled and their pieces are still stuck here. So for that reason, either they have to double up their pawns or they can't castle and have to put a king on a fade. Most people don't like to play that, although it's playable, I think. Most people go for moves like knight c6, a6, b6, which is very popular and considered one of the main lines. In this game, he surprised me with d6, because I knew that knight c6 leads to similar positions. After, let's say, d6 and d4, we get something similar. I didn't know if d6 was the same, and apparently you're supposed to just wait here and see what they do first, which makes some sense. What I played was still playable. I just went for d4, hoping for a Marosi bind. So if you don't know what a bind is, it's something like a pawn on c4 and a pawn on e4, saying you're never ever getting the center, never ever getting space. And that's what I'm looking to get, but it's not so easy. In quite a few of these games, I tried to get it, but it's not so easy to hold the bind because they always have some ways, whether e5, d5, or even f5, to try and unbalance things. So in the actual game, I got the center with the knight. And the good thing now is that the bishop can't come out because that could be really, really annoying. I was looking at something like, e5, d5, but I don't think it works well because let's say after e5, d5, first of all, he can't play it right away. And even after knight f6, bishop d3, his knight is helping, so he could play like that, but I don't think it's anything promising. Even something like, let's say, pawn takes and bishop check look very nice for white. Okay, so for that reason, I said, oh, wait. I don't think he's going to go for that. He's just going to play it like a hedgehog, and that's kind of what happened. Okay, the hedgehog is where black puts everything on the first three rows and says, I don't mind if you have space. I'll just wait for you to encroach, and then I'll kick out the intruders. Okay, so white says, okay, let's protect this guy. Why don't we play a normal move? Why don't we just play knight c3? Well, how does our pawn feel about that? He had such dreams of being on c4, of getting the center, had such promise, but no. Now the knight is weak and the pawn hates him for it. You just made everyone depressed. Okay, for that reason, no, I'm not taking out that knight, and I'm not making the other bishop miserable either. Let's get this guy over here instead. And then later, bishop will come out, pawn will come where it's supposed to, everything's great. So I'm just trying to get my setup. I'm just trying to get the Marosi bind going. Castle, castle, bishop b2. And at this point, I'm expecting something like, a6, c4, b6, knight c3. and then it's easy pickings. It's not exactly game over, like there's still a lot of chess to be played, but white is the one that's pressing, because the bishop will come back, queen will come out, rook comes here at some point, maybe king h1, f4, and here we go. And of course, that would be great if white can get all the dreams he ever dreamed of, except that rarely happens. And in this game, he decides to put a wrench in my plans with e5. So Eduard says, no, your bishop is not gonna mate me, and you always have to worry about d5, because if I ever get d5, how's that square feeling? How do you like forks? Because you're gonna get a few of them right now. So I said, no, okay, let's calm down here, no forks coming, because even if you try something like this, I can get out my knight, I'm better developed, e5 is falling, this is not a thing, because I can always get e5. In the actual game, he's saying, mate, what about no? Are you sure you have e5 falling? I don't think so. So I always have to watch out. At this point, I spent quite some time on the next few moves, maybe 20, 30 minutes, trying to figure out the move order. Now, the time control was pretty long. It's like an hour and 40 for 40 moves and an extra 30-second increment. So I can afford to spend the time with the nuances of the opening, trying to figure out the move orders. Okay, that may cost you later on, and that's exactly what happened, but I think it's worth it just to get a playable position out of the opening. Let's say I play something silly right now. Okay, let's say I play some silly moves. If I don't watch out, here's what I was thinking. Let's say I just play normal moves, and this is still okay, but now it becomes pretty scary. Okay, now I have to find some move that stops the pin. And this is still okay if I find those moves, maybe queen e2, queen e3. But if I'm not careful, this is what can happen. Okay, his knight can head over, and I don't really like that. Let's say I play d4 right now. I was considering knight e6, and I didn't like the sound of this. Knight g5, knight f4. Every square is good for him. I was thinking, why? Why allow all that play if we can kick it out? I need a way to stop the pin. But the bishop can come back because he has a job too. Okay, if I put the knight here, he may be kind of miserable later on. Okay, if I put the rook here, the rook will get kicked later. So it's hard to figure out where the pieces belong. My bishop kind of wants to cover the square, but doesn't want to go back home. Right? So after thinking for a bit, I realized the pawn has to kick out the bishop, so there is no knight h5, knight f4. And the queen has to come to e3 to break the pin. So any dreams he has of knight d4 are gone forever. Okay? He starts playing some good moves here. So the real point of this is actually bishop here saying hi to my queen. He sees me coming from a mile away and starts looking at these nuances, like how to kick out my queen. At the same time, he's helping out the knight. He's getting ready for rook d8, all these useful ideas. Okay, knight d2. I need to get rid of this guy, primarily. Okay, that's the first idea. And also just reinforcing, right? Making sure that everything's fine, everything is safe. Overprotection, okay? Knight e6, and I don't mind him pinning me anymore because of this guy. At this point, I thought he was getting ready to kick me with that bishop. The thing about something like bishop d8 is that the queen hates being here. The queen doesn't like being here at all, and I can just throw in a pawn. Okay. After c5, let's say, knight takes. Uh-oh. Right? And even if pawn takes, uh-oh. I like this structure because this guy is not doing great. Suddenly I got this square for the knight and bishop. My bishop's fantastic again. He can dream again. Queen is coming out and everything's in order all of a sudden. Okay. His queen will hate this. Okay. For that reason, he decided to block everything first. He says no c5, no b4. Right? So it's not so simple. I was even looking at b4 just to get the same idea with c5, but the problem is a5. Okay, and I'm not a big fan of these positions. Okay, if I play b5, this square is his forever. If I take, the rook is celebrating New Year's. That's my present to the rook. I don't like that at all. For that reason, rook c1, queen c5, and I decide to trade off the queens. I can say that black has a target. You, sir, have a problem on d6. And of course, computers don't really care that much about it. But for a human, it's like, you have a target, I don't. I will put everything I have on it and squeeze you till the end of time. And that's why I love my Rosy Vine. Now on his part, he can say he has some squares, but without the queen, the squares don't mean much, right? Let's say they trade off queens. Okay, I put the rook over here, swing the bishop back, start kicking him back. Eventually, his bishop will hate being on g6, but my pieces will start encroaching, getting closer and closer. For that reason, in the actual game, he doesn't want to trade on my terms. He wants to trade on his turn. Okay, and if he gets one knight over here, one knight over there, maybe that's a good position for him because I'll never get to his weakness. Okay, I get ready because in some cases I can take and kick out the knight, and he says no. Fair enough. He doesn't want me to kick him away. My knight really hates the bishop, so we get rid of him. Finally, I swing to f5 and say, look at how pretty my knight is. I bet you hate him, don't you? And they do. And if they take, it gets even worse. Because this knight may look pretty, but in the future, a few moves from now, he's gonna hate himself too. In the meantime, ooh, diagonal, target, light squares are all ours. This is just fantastic for white. Okay. In the actual game, he's not so nice. For some reason, good players just don't give you bishop pairs that easy, and he swings them back. Okay. I decide that it's more important to cover b4. So in case of any a4, I always have b4. And I don't care about the queen trade so much anymore. Because are they going to mate me? With what army? You and what army? Okay. So the knight decides to bother me because sometimes there are tricks on knight takes e4. Okay. So my goal is now to make sure f4 is mine, just in case. And maybe f4 and g3. Okay, so these pawns can finally start going up. And I was actually looking at g4. Question is when to do it so they don't have knight f4. Okay, that's on the agenda. The queen decides to bother me over here with a4, which is kind of annoying because he wants to make a target and say, I have a target, you have a target. Okay, and if I ever take, you have even more targets. a4, c4, a2, everything is weak. For that reason, I say, you can push, but I can also push. Okay, the idea behind this is like, if he pushes, he cannot push a3. Because what I would really hate, let's say I do something lazy. Okay, lazy move, a4, and then a3. Bishop here is not a thing because the rook will take my pawn. And if bishop here, then uh-oh, ouch. Bishop here, and I'm starting to lose the thread here. All the apples are falling down off the trees. Okay, and I don't want that. So instead, we have bishop a3, just saying, ooh, don't forget, you, sir, have a target. He protects. And we come for the magic square. My plan is something like stick one guy here, push this pawn here, push this guy there, push this guy here, maybe scare him away with g5, stick a knight on d5, and squeeze him off the board. Okay. And make sure e4 is never a thing, ever again. Because last turn, he can start looking into knight takes and taking my knight. Okay, so we overprotect everything, get f3, and he creates counterplay. He's just in time to annoy me. It's a bit annoying. There are probably better ways to stop the counterplay on c4. But in the game, I just said, you know what? Let's overprotect this guy. Let's get one knight here. Let's scare away your bishop, and he decides to take. Okay, so I just tried to overprotect everything. Yeah. In the game he took, and this was my one big mistake. This is what I really shouldn't do, is take with the knight. Okay, that lost the whole advantage. Okay, he can't take right away because of here, but why take with knight if you can take with pawn? After pawn takes is a different story because this guy is protecting c4. This knight is not staying here. And even though I can't take right away because of b4, I can always protect it later. Okay. Now my problem is when looking at this line, I only saw this rook. And then after something like that, I can't play a3 because knight d3. So that's one thing I missed. But just generally, I should take back with the pawn and stick something on the light squares. So that was silly of me. All right. In the actual game, we go for c5, e5, c5 and e5 because I get to take both. Okay, and it looks good for white, but it's not so simple. Suddenly black's pieces get their way too. My pieces open up and so do theirs. I should say at this point, I'm down to 2 minutes. Things are getting hectic. I need to make 8 more moves to reach time control. And I only have 30-second increment. So this is where things get really spicy, okay? Until we hit move forward. He hits my queen, we run away, and I say, maybe I'm gonna mate you. No such luck. Right away, he steps on the side. He could also play knight h5 as long as he protects this square and doesn't let me take. If I ever take with a knight on f5, he's not surviving that, I don't think. All right, because of the light squares too. All right, so that's what I was dreaming of, but not today. In the actual game, he was attacking my pawn. That's why he stepped off the c file and stuck a knight. I thought this was a mistake for him. He probably shouldn't be trading off the knight blocking the file at the same time. Instead, maybe trade off some pieces over here, maybe trade off my bishop. All of that made a lot more sense. Okay, but okay, we're in time travel, and I got to block his file just in time. As long as the file is closed, I don't have to worry about much. Okay, he asks my pawn a question, saying that his knight is heading for my blockade. If he gets to destroy the blockade, he's doing great. Okay. Yet at the same time, I got a pawn. So finally, we hit time control, and I take the bishop. Okay. We get to kick out the queen, and I was pretty happy upon reaching time control. I said, whew, okay, it's all good. Now I have an extra pawn. He's not gonna make me. And I got the light squares. We got the c file. Everything is great. Coming back after time control, I looked at it again and I said, wait a second. Uh-oh. 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 This is not so clear. Queen g3's in the air. This pawn's annoying. I can't really use my bishop. He's useful and useless at the same time. Just like the c file. The a pawn is miles away from being useful. This pawn can be a weakness too sometime. So it's not so easy to play. In order not to get mated, I have to get my queen back. If I'm careless, like let's say I play something dumb, okay? Right away h5, h4. Okay, after something like here, probably g5. I was looking at this and I'm like, oh, this is scary. Okay, then h4 is coming, horrifying. For that reason, I said no thank you. Let's go push some pawns. Okay, this is our majority. This is where I decided to push. I could try to play for this pawn, but that's harder. Okay, at this point I decided I want to mate him because I have the good bishop versus the okay knight. I have the pawns on the king side, and I can say that his king is lonely. Okay, so I tried to go for mate. I tried to go for e6, but it didn't turn out to be so easy. If I push right away, nothing happens. We just go to like an equal endgame. Okay, so I want to push with e6 and get this guy to somewhere nice, to greener pastures. But that's not so easy because it's pinned too. And this is another fun moment, quote unquote fun. And you know, it's so subtle to figure out which way is better. G3, moving the king back, or moving the king here. Moving the king here probably doesn't help because of the check. I decided on king h1, and it turns out the best was g3, because you break the pin, and also don't get forked later on, like what happened in the game. Okay, I was scared about the 7th rank because I was looking at the 2nd rank here, and I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I want nothing to do with that. Okay, that's a typical human reaction. For a computer would look at this. What 2nd rank? No 2nd rank here. Okay, so that's my fault. Probably I should play g3 regardless. Now, in the actual game, we went for this forcing line where I push and I try to promote, and I'm so close to queening, but he's just in time to stop me with knight e4. Okay, my idea is if he takes, I just promote. I wanted to give him the bishop, but he didn't want to take it. And the real problem is that after the knight's here, he's kicking the queen, but also getting closer to my king. Okay, I take with check, and I kind of have to. I win a pawn, and only here did I realize that this endgame is probably losing, because despite the check, he can block with the queen. If I take, he takes with the pawn, not with the knight, allowing mate, but with the pawn. And only now did I realize this guy's hanging, this guy's promoting. If I go back, he pushes. I go here, fork. And this is the reason why the king shouldn't be on h2. he should be on h2, not h1, and should have a pawn on g3 instead. Right? So that was very silly. And in the actual game, I couldn't trade off the queens. And now I'm in real trouble. I'm getting into time trouble again, only after 12 moves. And I have to decide how to keep the game going. The bishop's hanging, and the queen looks like it's hanging. Then I thought for a second, I said, wait a second, the queen is not hanging because of mate. Only the bishop's hanging, so we just move the bishop back. And feel free to take at any time. Right? Here, believe it or not, this position is actually equal. Right? Because my pawn is strong, their pawn is strong, and it balances out. It looks scary, but it's equal. In the actual game, he tries to trick me. So right now he says, ooh, your queen's actually tasty, and I can taste it next turn. But I always have queen e3. Even better is queen f4, but that's hard to figure out. Right? After queen e3, it's so subtle to tell the differences between moves. It's kind of like detonating a bomb, yeah? So when somebody's disabling a bomb in a movie, you have two wires, and you have to figure out which wire do I pull. That's what this felt like. But anyways, in the actual game, they push, I run away, they get the queen even closer, and try to find the only move. Let's say you're white right now. Would you play f6? Would you try to move out the way? Or would you try to do something else? Right, I'll give you 3 seconds. What would you play to survive? Ready? 3, 2, 1. And if you said King G1, congratulations. The only way to keep the game going is to avoid the check. Anything else, like f6 or any other tempting move, is losing. Okay, this fork is actually scary. Right? And now it gets even scarier because now there are all kinds of threats. Okay, there is that discovery. There's rook d3, which is really, really annoying. Okay, so after the trade, he could even take and promote with the help of the knight. Okay, so let's say I do nothing. Right? I do nothing. This is losing. Okay, then I think this is gonna be a problem. Maybe not in this variation, but in variations like it, this is always a problem. Okay, so for that reason, I said no. Let's put an end to that right away. Make sure you don't promote, and we have to trade. After the trade, it turns out that his pawns are scarier than mine, and he will promote because of this. Okay, but that's not even the end of the world. That's not so scary. So in time trouble, we're both down to maybe 3-4 minutes now. We start playing off these moves. I have to give him the bishop for the pawn. And in order to give up the bishop, I need to create counterplay here. As he will promote, I need to get pawns that are so scary, they're worth a piece. Okay? If I take this guy, this is just game over. I can't afford to take, so I have to go back. And he gets rid of my bishop. This is a nice maneuver just to get rid of my bishop. Another interesting point here that I wanted to show. In the game, I went bishop d1, and he will trade off from my bishop very soon. He will get the pawn to the end, or just about. Okay. A better idea was bishop e4 for this amazing variation that could have happened. If the pawn goes here, king comes in. He pushes, I take. It looks like this is a deadly discovery. It looks like I'm losing a rook. And then, beautiful geometry on the board. The rook is all by itself. The knight cannot help anyone. And the pawns are looking forward to the future. The king is stuck with this guy. And the bishop dominates the whole world. Okay. After a5, the rook cannot stop anyone. And this is game over for black. Black is losing. Okay. So in the actual game, sadly, I did not find that and went for bishop d1. Okay. And as they start to push the pawn, I have to get some counterplay. Better than nothing. And he gets my bishop. The good news is, right over here, he makes the final mistake, which allows me to run away. If he found this idea of knight a3, knight c4, he gets to stop my pawns, defend his pawn, and get everything he wanted. This will probably win for black. Okay, and that's what we both missed in the game. And it's not obvious why the knight should be over here and not like here trying to stop the pawns, right? But that was a mistake on his part. In the actual game, the knight cannot help. So I win the pawn, and we get 3 pawns for the knight in this crazy endgame. Okay, and it's just balanced enough for white to hold. Okay, black has to be careful too because these pawns are not fooling around. Okay, I first give him a check because I want to see where things end up. I think I even pushed the pawn first to wait for the knight here and then do this. But in the end, we got to this position. Okay, and as the rook protects all the pawns, they're scary enough that black has to sacrifice the piece for them. Okay, and that's exactly what he ends up doing. He has to give up the knight and get into this endgame. 3 versus 2 on the king side in the rook endgame. Like I was telling him after the game that probably if the pawn is over here and this guy's over here, that's playable because I'll stick a king here, I'll bring a rook to e4, and I've seen similar endgames that are winning for white. For example, Karpov beat Shirov in something very similar. Okay, but because the pawn is the wrong pawn in f5, this is not winning. They will at some point trade off this guy. I can't really do much to stop it. And then we get a 2-on-1, which is an easy draw. Okay, and let's see how the game ended. I try to help my pawns, try to get them somewhere useful, but he trades off. If I trade, that's a simple draw. If he trades over here, it's also a simple draw. I'm hoping in some magical world to get my king here, but it's not going to happen because he just trades off the pawns. And after the trade, my king is not one that can win this endgame with the h-pawn. Wherever their king was, I'm not going to win this endgame because it's also an h-pawn, which doesn't really help my case. Okay, so very interesting game, especially in that middle game. Okay, and the dynamics were really flowing with tactics everywhere. Okay, especially with moves like bishop b3 and knight a3 that could have won. I really like that part. So I hope you found that useful and hope you get to play fun games like this in the new year. Happy 2022.